stage our final storyteller, Melanie Tait. Okie dokie. When I was 14 in the mid-90s, my best friend in the world was Melanie Tait. And there are two times in life where you have a relationship like we had. When you're a teenage girl and when you date somebody who's a little bit crazy. So you know that kind of relationship where you do everything for each other. You live, you breathe for each other. We would wake up in the morning and be on the bus and be writing letters to each other, and then we'd hang out all day at school. This was before email and text and stuff. We'd write each other letters in spare periods, and then we'd hang out for lunch, and then we'd finish school and we'd get on the bus and we'd write each other letters, and then we'd be on the phone for 2 hours every night, do the same thing all over again every day. We're each other's lives. The really horrible thing about the school that we went to was at the end of term 3, every single year, you'd have to go on a camp. And I don't mean like a normal camp, it was a bloody awful camp. You'd have to go 2-3 days without any toilets or anything, and it would be climbing up some bloody big hill and right down again. It was absolutely awful. I believe I actually have people in the audience that were at that school and can contest how awful it was. So for a kid like me, I was probably about 20 kilos overweight, lots of pimples. The thought of going up and down a hill, being the last of all my friends, not having mirrors to check for pimples every morning was just horrendous. So I really tried to get out of this camp. I did everything I could to get out of it, and my parents said, no way, it's compulsory, it's character building, you're going. It was pretty awful. One day, we were all sitting around at lunchtime talking about camp and how awful camp was, and I said, well, I'm not going, that's it, I'm just not going. And everybody said, well, of course you're going. I said, no, I'm going to Sydney for the weekend. And just like that, I had to do it. So Verona and I started to hatch a plan, and it was some plan. We started saving all of our money from canteen every single day, and we forged each other's notes saying, dear school people, Melanie will not be attending camp due to family reasons. Yours sincerely, H. Tait. That kind of thing. It was quite the ruse. It was the perfectly planned crime. The only problem was everybody in the school knew about it. But they were keeping stum. Stum. The day of camp arrived, and we'd planned things, I'm telling you, with military precision. We planned it so that camp left at 7 o'clock. We had our parents drop us off at 6 o'clock in camp gear. In our back were all our Sydney clothes, because we lived in the country, and Sydney was the bright lights, it was just fantastic. So once we were sure our parents had gone, they didn't even suspect anything, which you'd think now as a parent they would, because nobody else was there. It was just the two of us, little rat bags waiting. They drove off, and we looked, the coast was clear, and we walked the 500 metres to Burradoo train station for the 6:42 train to Sydney. We got on the train, we changed into our Sydney clothes, and we sat down, and both of us just couldn't believe we'd got away with it. Couldn't believe it. We were sitting there across from each other. How fantastic, can you believe we got away with it? Now we're in our Sydney clothes, and what are we going to do? We're going to have so much fun. We're going to go shopping at the QVB. And it was all talk of QVB, clothes, and haven't we got away with it? And oh my gosh, I really hope I marry David Chambers when I get older. That was all the talk. We finally got to Sydney, and we had planned this, like I said, with military precision, and we had planned and booked, and with a fake name, which anybody who read Sweet Valley High will know Jessica Wakefield. That was our pseudonym that I'd booked in a very fancy English accent a few days before at the Central Private Hotel in Elizabeth Street in Sydney. Now, if anybody doesn't know the Central Private Hotel, if you've seen that movie Big, and you remember the time when he is in a hotel for the very first time, there's guns going off and people yelling, that's the Central Private Hotel in Elizabeth Street in Sydney. So we got into the Central Private Hotel, and I guess because I was an overweight kid, they just couldn't tell that I was 14 years old. And they checked us in, we went upstairs, and we got ready for our big day in the city. Now, we couldn't go to the QVB that day because Verona's mother was at the dentist in the city, so we just stayed away. Now, what do you think you would do if you were 14-year-old runaways, as we were by this stage? You'd think we'd go to the Cross, get ourselves some dope, have a few drinks? No. we were studying Francis Greenway architecture at the time at school, so we went along to Hyde Park Barracks and to Macquarie Street, and we were such stealthy criminals that we signed all the guest books saying that we were there. And we thought this was the perfect crime. We were just doing so well. It got to be about 6 o'clock that night, and we made our way back to the Central Private Hotel and on Elizabeth Street in Sydney, and went up to our room and sat in our room and watched Drop Dead Fred and smoked a Long Beach Mild. That was all we did that night because we were just so excited about waking up in the morning going to the QVB. So the next day, we got to the QVB. We'd been in there probably 20 minutes, only 20 minutes, when we're in that store Ooh La La. And I don't know if you remember Ooh La La, but at the time it was a teenage girl's heaven. It was all shitty jewellery and crappy hats. And we're in Ooh La La, and through the door walked Verona's sister's boyfriend. And just like that, the air thickened, and he said, "Hello, Verona." And she said, "Hello, Mark." And he said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Shopping," and burst out crying. And we were sprung. That was it. We were sprung. And they left me in Ooh La La. Mark took Verona, I don't know where, and they left me by myself in Ooh La La, 14 years old, QVB. You know, I get goosebumps even thinking about it now. I thought, oh my God, we've been sprung. We're going to be kicked out of school. My life is over. My mum's going to go crazy. What should I do? Should I stay on the run? Or should I go downstairs to the QVB public phones and call my dad? Which is what I did. And it turned out my poor father had been traipsing all around Sydney and King's Cross because he thought that we'd been abducted and all sorts of things. And he'd been accosted by prostitutes and pimps and all sorts of people. And I rang him. He had a mobile phone, which was really strange for those days, but he did. And I rang him and said, "Dad," and he said, "Where are you?" I said, "QVB." He said, "I'm so disappointed." Awful. Now, you might be wondering how we got sprung. It was twofold. There was a woman sitting behind us as we sat and chatted, and we said, "I can't believe we got away with it. We're going to QVB. I can't wait till I marry David Chambers." It was David Chambers' best friend's mother was sitting behind us. So she knew that we were from the school we were from and called it in to the school. They sort of got in touch, somehow sent missions into the camps to find out if it was true that we weren't there, and we weren't there. But also, little did I know that stealthy criminals we were not, because apparently stealthy criminals keep everything quiet. And the day before, two of our friends had been in the hairdressers talking about this fantastic plan that we'd come up with, and the hairdresser was my mum's next door neighbour. Just awful. After this happened, I mean, to a 14-year-old, you think that your life is going to absolutely come to an end. And we were, this friendship that was everything to both of us had been completely torn apart, completely. And I was sent off to my auntie's house, and Verona, I don't know what she was doing, but no one would tell us what was going on. So the whole time, the week that I was at my auntie's house, I wasn't sure whether I was going to be expelled or not, and it was just all really, really awful. And it turned out that finally one of my little friends, one of my allies, and I can't believe we had any allies left at school, because the fact of the matter is at school everybody was called into an hour-long assembly and made write an essay on the code of silence. So it was amazing we had any friends at all. But it turned out, I found out through this friend, that we were suspended for 3 days each, solitary suspension, and where we had to write essays all day and then come back to school. And the day we got back to school is when it got kind of awful, because where usually we'd wake up in the morning, we'd write the letters, get to school, hang out together, that was all gone. And when I got to school, a friend of Verona's, not even Verona, handed me a letter and said, "Dear Melanie, I'm so sorry, but my parents have said that you're a bad influence and we can no longer be friends. I wish you all the best in your life. I know you'll make your dreams come true, and I know you'll marry David Chambers. Love, Verona." And it was the breaking of something that there was no fixing. It's been broken pretty much ever since that day. And I forgot my last line of the story. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. But it was, it was something that was broken and there was no fixing it. And my apologies for forgetting my last night, but thank you very much.
The fabulous Melanie Tait.